Okay, my name is Barbara Campbell, and I'm a former board chair and board member of Mary's Place. And I got involved through Plymouth Congregational Church way back in 1998 or 97. I don't remember exactly when.
Great.
Anything else?
How can you describe like how you got involved through the church?
Well, I was at the time chairing the Community Service and Social Action Board at Plymouth Church, and we were looking for organizations that we could support. And Mary's Place was one of those places, or actually at that time it was Church of Mary Magdalene, was one of those places we were looking at. And I volunteered to interview the few people at Church of Mary Magdalene to see if they would be a good fit for Plymouth Church. And while doing that, I was very impressed with the few people who were there, one of whom was Marty Hartman, another who was Pat Simpson, the former pastor of Church of Mary Magdalene. She came after the founder, Jean Kim. And there was a part-time secretary, and I don't remember her name. And I was very impressed. And at that same time, they said they needed board members. And so I volunteered to be a board member.
Great. Do you have a do you have a favorite memory of Mary's Place? Was there like a moment or an interaction that really stands out to you?
No, I think I was impressed with the whole organization, how much they did with the few resources that they had, and how passionate both Marty and Pat were at the time. And it was just the kind of thing I was looking for, a place that would serve homeless people.
Mhm. Over your time working with them, did you have like an experience that you think really stands out to you, like when you look back on all your years?
But there were so many. I don't know if I can pick out one in particular. I know that shortly after I uh, became an active board member, and in fact, I think at the time I may have been chairing the board for Church of Mary Magdalene, and they had a hats and tea fundraiser at Mercer Island Presbyterian Church every year. It was a luncheon. Did I say hats and tea?
Mhm.
That was the name of it. And I gave a speech about what Church of Mary Magdalene did. And I was impressed because I'd never given a speech like that before. And I looked at the audience and people were crying. And I thought, oh my goodness, what an impact I'm making. But the long and short of it is that that was the most money at that particular time that they'd ever raised. So I was pretty proud of that. But I mean, there were so many instances of good things happening at Mary's Place, the Christmas parties, the board members who were so very passionate about helping Mary's Place and Church of Mary Magdalene and the women that they served. So it was in all probably one of the best and longest lasting experiences I've ever had. I don't know if that is good enough, but
Mhm. What impact did you see Mary's Place having in the Seattle community?
well, Mary's Place started out as a very small organization, and its impact was huge because they were one of the only organizations at the start, especially when it was Church of Mary Magdalene, who actually were helping homeless women in particular. There were lots of shelters for homeless men, like DESC and Plymouth Housing and, Lehigh and on and on and on. But there was really nothing for helping women. And so for the Church of Mary Magdalene and Mary's Place to be helping women was quite unique at the time. So their impact in Seattle was huge and in King County because they were serving a population that had not been well served. And then as they grew, they had an even larger impact because they started helping women with children, and there was no place that would take in children, no place at the time. And then they started helping families, and there was no place that would take in whole families and keep them together. It used to be that if you were homeless as a family, the men went to one shelter and the women went to another shelter, and the children might go to a third place or maybe be able to stay with the women, but there was no shelter to keep families together. And Mary's Place was, I believe, the first shelter that did that. So that made a huge impact.
Mhm. How did you see Mary's Place change and grow over your time working there?
Well, when I started, it was the Church of Mary Magdalene, and I don't know if you're aware of the history, but it started out as the organization was the Church of Mary Magdalene, and the place the women came to, which is the First Methodist Church on Fifth and Columbia, was the actual physical location that the women came to during the day. I forget the question now. Oh, and so anyway, as they as it grew, it then changed. Uh, and the only way it could continue to grow would be for it to become a secular organization. And so then they separated, and then they had two organizations, but there was a lot of overlap. And then I actually was the one who had the meeting with Marty and the the board chair at the time and said, this isn't working. There's a duplication of effort. And so then we brought the organizations back together again, and Mary's Place became the umbrella, and the Church of Mary Magdalene was the spiritual component of Mary's Place. And that allowed Mary's Place to begin to grow tremendously because it allowed for Mary's Place to get more money because you couldn't get government funding, you couldn't get corporate funding unless you were secular. So that was a major uh, change in Mary's Place and how it operated. And Mary's Place then became what will next year be 25 years. They started in 1999 as a secular organization that allowed the organization to grow by leaps and bounds. So I guess today their budget is like $40 million. And when I started at Church of Mary Magdalene, their budget was 250,000. And when the Church of Mary Magdalene started, and before I became board chair, the uh, annual budget was something like 50,000. So the growth in that 25-year time span is just simply amazing. I'm not sure there are any other, charitable organizations serving the homeless that grew at that pace.
Mhm. When you think about Mary's Place, the history of the organization and Mary's Place history, is there one event or time period that stands out to you as particularly important?
Yeah, I think when they made the switch from, being two separate organizations and going back into being one, but with the reverse of Mary's Place being the umbrella and Church of Mary Magdalene being, um, the spiritual entity within Mary's Place. I think that really was a major change. And without that change, had the board not agreed to that and moved forward with that, I don't think Mary's Place would be anywhere near as big and what's the word I'm looking for? Inspirational as it is today.
Mhm. And when thinking about the future of Mary's Place, what do you hope to see for the organization?
That it never exists. And I say that because I hope that there is a day when there is no such thing as homelessness. But until then, I think Mary's Place continues to go in the right direction. And I think that they're forward looking enough so that they see what's going on in the community, and they have the type of board that comes together and said, this is what's needed, and we're going to figure out a way to make that happen so that we meet the needs of those that we serve, that is, the homeless population. And Mary's Place will exist until we end homelessness. So my hope is that someday we won't need places like Mary's Place or DESC or any of those, but I don't know if that will happen.
Mhm. So those were all of my official questions, but is there anything else that you want to share? Any other experiences or insights about Mary's Place that you want to share?
No, no, I think that pretty much covers it, except, I do have all of these um, newsletters,
Mhm.
and in amongst all of those were actually a lot of minutes, and they give a lot of the history in terms of timelines, when things took place. And so I'll keep them for you when you can look through them. I don't know, do you have minutes?
Yeah, I think there are some in the documents that we've um
Oh, okay, so you
uploaded,
maybe,
but I mean, more is always nice.
yeah, and you may have these, and if so, you won't need them, but I'll hold on to them and you can look through them. But I personally found them interesting. But I'll tell you one thing I couldn't find is what years did I actually chair the boards? I just couldn't find it any place, but it doesn't matter. I like Mary's Place. I love Mary's Place, as you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't, I just hope that it continues to grow and help women and children and families, and helps them, find stable housing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's my goal for them.
Well, thank you for sitting down with me and sharing your experiences about Mary's Place. I really appreciate you participating in this project.
Well, you're perfectly welcome. Thank you for interviewing me.